The 77th World Health Assembly will meet in Geneva, Switzerland, beginning next Monday to consider amendments to the international health regulations and a new pandemic treaty, both of which will substantially expand the United Nations organization's power. That is the World Health Organization. Joining me now to discuss this, Travis Weber, Vice President for Policy and Government Affairs here at the Family Research Council, who will actually be traveling to Geneva to be there next week to observe and report from the World Health Assembly. Travis, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you, Tony.
So it looks like, based upon some comments, that there's some difficulty getting this across the line. So it looks like the awareness, the agitation, if you will, that we and others have created may be derailing their plan to get this thing through and grab that power next week.
Certainly, there have been a number of issues raised, and there appears to be some log jams with regard to agreement on these issues, and it's understandable. It's understandable that sovereign nations do not want to automatically give up their right to control their own intellectual property, their own productivity, economic output, and sovereignty ability to determine the course of action for their nations, and be it at the hands of the WHO. And so it's common sense that we would see what we're seeing. UK Telegraph, op-ed pages of the Telegraph, other outlets putting out opinion pieces by people saying, look, we're not so sure our nation should go ahead. Even Secretary Blinken himself admitting before Congress in the past few days that we don't really know that there's agreement right now on this pandemic
But they're
agreement.
pushing for it, but they're trying to get a consensus. The Biden administration appears to be all in, but just this week, 24 governors writing to the president saying, don't sign on to this, because the governors appear to be more concerned about their sovereignty than Joe Biden seems to be concerned about the sovereignty of the U.S.
The governors have a very important claim that they make in that letter. As a constitutional matter, under our nation's constitution, we hear a lot, Tony, we hear a lot in the press and in the culture right now about democracy, protecting democracy. Well, if we're going to look at that, the Constitution leaves healthcare to the states, does not put it in the hands of the federal government, certainly does not put it in the hands of the federal government to be automatically put in the hands of an international body like the WHO. So these are things that have to be considered, and in no way should there be agreement on all these things, on all these matters between the nations of the world less than a week from now when they convene in Switzerland. In no way is there agreement right now. So nations should not be rushing into this. This needs to be delayed and considered before there's agreement to it.
So it's wide-ranging in terms of its impact. I mean, you mentioned not just the healthcare issue. This could lead to masking, shutdowns, vaccinations, but you mentioned intellectual property. There's also the concern over the suppression of free speech, because signatories to this, the parties would be required to clamp down on what they call misinformation. So this is a far-reaching document. It also does not define what an emergency is, so that the World Health Organization, under what we've seen thus far, would have a lot of latitude in terms of what they could declare an emergency, a crisis, and then exercise their authority.
That's right. And for viewers and listeners who might be asking, well, what is it you're actually talking about? We're talking about a proposed agreement which nations would agree with and bind themselves together internationally to deal with purportedly the problems that have arisen since the last pandemic. So it's understandable people look and say, let's try to prevent things that we did not want to happen. You have Tedros Ghebreyesus, the president, the head of the WHO, and today with an op-ed in the USA Today, making this appeal. Can't we fix these issues? But on the backs of that desire comes a binding agreement, which will bind our sovereign nation and others to all sorts of areas which we should not be agreed to. Tony, you mentioned some of them. These are all areas of concern, giving away intellectual property, economic rights, sovereignty, binding ourselves to being required to clamp down on free speech, all areas we need to look at.
And blurring the line between humans and the climate and others with One Health.
The concept of One Health is mentioned. What is it? Do people even know what it is? Is there a common understanding? Rightly, we're concerned about what's the worldview guiding these things. So, Tony, this is important that people understand FRC is going to Geneva to help bring a Christian perspective to this and help Christians think through this.
Well, I also think it is a precursor to one world government, because even though the UN's been there, they've never had this type of enforcement authority and power of regulation over member states.
And the key to that is looking at what happened with COVID. We can think back to 9/11. You see what happened in our own government after 9/11. Public crises are always opportunities, for good or for ill, and we're concerned about the ill.
And you're going to be there next week. You're going to be giving updates from Geneva. So, folks, if you want to stay abreast of what's happening, not only tune in, Travis will be joining me each day here on Washington Watch, but you'll also be doing updates from Geneva. Simply text WHO to 67742, and you'll get on the list to get those updates. Again, that's WHO to 67742. So Travis, what are your plans? We've got about 30 seconds here when you get on the ground there in Geneva.
Yeah, so we're going to just get a sense of what's happening overall, certainly the proceedings of the World Health Assembly. But, Tony, there's going to be a lot of people there and interested parties, nation states, NGOs. We just want to help people understand and think through and pray through all this.
There'll also be prayer warriors on the ground there, too.
We're going to be praying about it.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of folks there on the ground. Not only observing, but praying as well. Travis Weber, we look forward to having you on next week from Geneva.
Thank you.